Hey everybody, it's Tripl-L here to talk about My Hero Academia chapter 339, the story of how we all became heroes, part 2. Hey, so this is a new video for the new year. Happy New Year. Hope you guys are all staying busy. I know I am extremely busy, but hope you guys are all well. Hope you met the new year with good health, and I hope good health comes for all of us in this next year. And I also hope that we have a great year of Hero Academia. Last year of Hero Academia I think was pretty solid, so let's keep that going. Anyway, I already talked about this chapter a little bit for the spoilers, but now this is the official release, so we'll be doing the page-by-page walkthrough, and I'll be adding in any little details here and there, any little anecdotes that I think are funny. So sit back, relax, and let's get depressed about Hero Academia. No, not really. There's nothing to be depressed about. It was a perfectly okay chapter. I don't know. I didn't bother reading too much of the complaints. Like, I know some of them thanks to the live streams, but I don't know if people are complaining about the chapter, about like the way the humor is applied or anything like that, but we'll talk about it as it comes up. Anyway, let's get into it. The first page, I just gotta say, we all know my opinions on May in general, but I thought May was very nicely drawn in the chapter, and I thought the cover page too is quite adorable. I feel like this is thematically consistent with another one of May's cover pages, but I don't have the cover page saved, so I'm not too sure. It might be somewhere in the sports festival. Anyway, good for May. Now, going into page 2. So, one of the things I covered on the spoiler video was how this thing was set up. We talked about how the author created a situation where it looked like Izuku had the wrong idea about May. And looking at the official translation, it's worthwhile just seeing how the author stacked the deck against Izuku. And it's a little bit aggressive. It's actually kind of verging on, okay, author, I think this is actually a little bit unfair, but you know, it all comes down to the wording itself. So just to like show you what I'm talking about, we know that May knows the situation that's going on outside, and when you look at her dialogue in general, you have May, you know, her asking why not send it to the item agency like usual, and then you have Ida explaining, well, there's been a disruption, after which she goes in and says, oh, well, that actually makes sense. And then that's what leads into Izuku's whole thing about, is she clueless about the world? So the way that it's actually pretty interesting. The way that the author went about this is that he's pretty much saying that, okay, May knows the situation that's occurring outside, but she didn't make the logical connection of, oh yeah, if everything sucks, of course the supply chain would be disrupted. So it's actually really interesting there. And then what Izuku does is that he overlooks that there was a logical gap that had occurred, and he just goes straight into the absolute worst state about the whole situation. So when you're looking at the way he constructed this, it is like in some ways a little dubious depending on how you look at May. Because what he ultimately says is, oh yeah, no, it was just a small little thing, and then Izuku jumps the gun. And then as a reader, the thing would you be asking is like, okay, is May so illogical that she could not make the connection about the supply chain? Now the thing is, like, you could say that actually would work, given May's character has been ignorant of people before. Like if you go and you look at team up missions, May's the kind of person that before team up missions, at least, you know, just for the example, didn't consider the needs of the client that she was working for. So her not understanding the way economics works, and honestly in Hero Academia it is confusing. You're in an apocalypse, but for some reason people are still keeping the cell phone lines up. That means people are still going into work to maintain the cell phone infrastructure, or like, you know, the telecommunications infrastructure. Also, you have people who had the time to go and secure Gigantomachia during an apocalypse, when they could be targeted at any time. So when you look at it, like, actually with the way the Hero Academia universe works, May not knowing about supply chain problems that come out as an effect of the fact that you're living in a war zone makes sense, but it is legitimately dubious and kind of hard to wrap your head around. But again, because of all the conveniences that have been applied to the Hero Academia universe right now, the author has many ways to get out of this particular situation with May. When it comes to the technique that went in here, having Izuku jump the gun is actually probably the most critical thing here, because Izuku's the one who doesn't apply the level of nuance of saying like, oh yeah, no, she just didn't connect those two concepts together. Now, I know we just spent a lot of minutes talking about this, but this is the most critical thing that sets up May's reveal that she's actually a little bit wiser than she was initially painted to be. That's why the framing for this particular situation I think is so interesting to talk about. Now, I still have more things to say about this second and third page because there's still something really good here. So last chapter, I was really thinking that Izuku was going to freeze up, but he didn't. Actually, I think what the author gave us is just as funny because you have Izuku not freezing up. Well, he kind of stays frozen in his state of seriousness, which was hilarious to see May constantly like break it, which I thought was quite all right. I like that he approached her with absolute seriousness. So props to the author for that one. That was a great follow-up. Now the thing that I want to talk about is of course the thing with danger sense. Izuku says the danger sense didn't activate. I didn't realize it at first until we talked about it on the live stream, but this is absolutely great. That was probably one of the greatest things that the author could have done with danger sense in this chapter. I really appreciate it. The reason is simple. When we first had danger sense during the fight with the students, like Izuku versus Class 1A, Izuku pointed out that danger sense does not activate if the intention isn't behind the action. And at that time, I'm pretty sure that I talked about it on the videos, but if I didn't, I talked about it on the live streams, and I apologize for the video viewing audience. But one of the big issues with danger sense at that moment is if you're saying intention matters, then the logical conclusion there is that danger sense will not activate if there is an accident, because there is no intention behind an accident. So when you come into this chapter and you have Izuku saying it didn't activate, great, that's a great logical follow through. That is exactly what I wanted to see. I wanted to see Izuku get hit by an accident, and that's exactly what happened. At this point, now that I'm seeing that the author is willing to go all the way with that logical ramification of attaching intention to danger sense, what he's effectively done is that he's made danger sense very easy to work with. Now Izuku will still be allowed to be caught unaware. It just depends on whether or not something's coming in as an accident devoid of any human intention. I think this is a really great way to make danger sense still relevant for battles, but not something that makes Izuku near invincible at all times of the day. So props to the author for that one. Really appreciate it. I think this was a really good thing that he did here. Anyway, that's all for page 2. Page 3 is the reintroduction into Power Loader. Good to see him. Page 4, we just see what's going on in the workshop. We see that there's a UA barrier schematic in the background. We see that there's a lot of stuff going on. And, you know, we get told that they are in charge of research and development for the UA barrier. So that's cool. It gives a support department something to do, and really appreciate it. Now, one thing that I will say, and I think I've said it before in the videos, I know I've said it on live streams, but Hero Academia's biggest problem is the lack of symmetry. Because when Hero Academia doesn't have the symmetry being applied, you get to see its flaws a lot easier. You get to see its flaws a lot more clearly, and we'll talk about that towards the end because Ryukyu is a victim of this. But in this case, and I think I've mentioned this on the spoiler video, it's nice that we got to see the support department, but I would really like to see the business department, especially seeing like just how the support department's doing so much. It'd just be neat to see everyone really pitching in. I don't need to see the general students, but we have Shinzo that could stand in for them, but it's just something I would like to see, but I don't think we're going to get it because the business department is such an afterthought. Anyway, page 5 is another shot of Izuku being super serious and Mei just being like, nope, which was great and hilarious. Good to break Izuku out of his seriousness. The kid's way too serious. We then go into page 6, which is another pretty simple page of just Mei explaining why she can't help with anyone. She gives really good reasons. And this is like another issue of Mei probably doesn't have good communication skills because she doesn't tell anyone, oh, hey, you know, like, yeah, I can't do that, but I'll do this. She just goes ahead and starts working on it, which is fine. Like, she's already like a genius savant anyway. What you have to appreciate here is, again, like the author uses this character trait to build a false narrative that then surprises the readers when he reveals the full story with the character. On page 7, we find out that Mei has made it so that the evacuation shelters can blast off like Team Rocket. Anyway, other big details for this page is just more characterization for Mei, finding out the Power Loader had himself brought her on to take advantage of her curious and creative mind. And we also have shots of Izuku really just appreciating who Mei is. This is like, you know, as a shipper, I would say, oh, you know, these are the moments that Izuku falls in love with her. But, you know, this is Hero Academia. There's no love to be had unless it's for Ochako. On page 8 and 9, we have the most beautiful shot of Mei so far, and we also have the reveal. And this is the page where the author starts flipping things around when it comes to Mei. So one of the things that is, of course, very important to note here is that Izuku was wrong. You have it when Mei says, "Don't be dense, Midoriya." What's really important here is, again, you have to appreciate that the author is willing to let characters be wrong. And in this case, like, Izuku was taking for the chump because he was the one that was pretty much the framing device for the idea that Mei didn't have anything going on upstairs to be able to note what was going on. Yeah, 100% Izuku thought that the person who was working on the barrier is so focused on her inventions that she is ignorant to the rest of the world. What does that say about Izuku? Well, Mei tells us right there, Izuku is dense. So I think just remember in general, because the author's really good at this. In Hero Academia, characters will be wrong. And this kind of moment is just one of those moments that remind you that Izuku is not a god. Izuku is not always correct. The reason we have to bring this up is because there are some fans who will think that characters are always correct no matter what happens. And this is what leads into situations like Dobby, where Dobby is like one of the biggest jokes in the series. The author treats him like one of the biggest jokes. All his flaws are out there in the open, and yet people worship Dobby as if he's like the coolest thing since sliced cheese. And it's like, probably not. Like, this guy is being made fun of for not having friends by All For One of all people. If you're being made fun of by All For One, that potato head, you're probably not doing anything right. Anyway, Dobby slander aside, it's just, this is ultimately a very nice moment, and it shows you how the author went about making this particular situation. In order to make this work, he had to make Izuku look stupid. What really when you look at it, what really happens here is that Izuku thought Mei was as dense as he ends up being, which is a pretty interesting little reversal there. Now, can you really take this and make any like long-term observation about Izuku's character? Perhaps not, but you could maybe say that Izuku doesn't appreciate that normal people can be heroes too. Because Izuku is the person who was very fixated on being a hero at the very beginning. And also, if you think about it, like Izuku being the person who is willing to take everything on his own shoulders and do everything himself. He maybe doesn't, like, he, actually, when you think about it, Izuku probably doesn't respect the way that other people can be heroes too. Like, he's trying to protect his friends and all the other heroes. But in doing that, he's pretty much saying that you are not hero enough to face the dangers of the world, so therefore I will protect you. And actually, this reminds me of the things that we talked about back when Izuku was having an issue with Class 1A. That being like, Izuku, these people they've chosen to be heroes. They're going to get hurt. You can't protect them from everything. So actually, this might be just more of that. That might be more of Izuku not properly appreciating the way that people can be heroes. It's just like when you look at page 8's face for Izuku and also for Ida, they seem kind of surprised at this perspective. And also what's really interesting here is that this idea of being heroes in your own way, that's ultimately what we want for all of society. And I think I mentioned this already on the spoiler video, but this is just a reaffirmation of that general theme. It's just interesting how they have Izuku be in this position of having to be told. Anyway, on page 10, we have Mei showing off that she could replicate those things. Now, honestly, you know, this is one of those places where it's like, okay, she built the device in a few moments, right? This is one of those places where you're thinking, like, how does this girl not have a quirk that's building devices, right? Because this is a little bit incredible. This is like superhuman. Well, but you know, when you think about Hero Academia, there's many people with other superhuman traits. Like Stain is practically superhuman, even though his quirk is very low powered. It's just really interesting, right? When you see this really quick ability that's not recognized as a superpower. Anyway, by page 11, we are done with the whole segment, and we find out that we're going to be teaming up with Mount Lady. Very interesting. I do wonder if we're going to be seeing Edgeshot next chapter, but it looks like we're going to be dealing with All Might and the Pro Heroes, so probably not. Anyway, I really do hope we get to see something of the kids doing something next chapter, so fingers crossed. But the page turns into wondering about Aoyama. And this is probably one of the weirdest choices. The author had Shoto come in and said that Aoyama has always had his sights set on the man he wants to be, more than any of us. And I'm just thinking, like, Shoto, why would I ever believe you? I don't think you've ever talked to Aoyama. Okay, maybe you've talked to him once or twice, but you've rarely talked to Aoyama, you were fooled by Aoyama, and what's worse, Shoto is the character who is the most dense of Class 1A. How many times have we seen Shoto not understand basic conversation? Many, many, many times. Shoto doesn't understand intonation. He doesn't understand sarcasm. The guy takes everything at face value. 100% he takes everything at face value. So what are you trying to say when he says he wants to be more than any of us? We know what Aoyama wanted to do because we saw Aoyama's inner monologue. Aoyama wanted to protect his parents. So the kind of man that Aoyama wants to be is the kind of person that protects his parents. Aoyama's thinking that he's a villain right now too, but he ultimately wants to protect his parents and try to be a nice guy. But it doesn't matter what he wants to be if the way he goes about doing it ultimately screws everyone else over. Now, mind you, I got a little bit spirited there, but that's just because this is incredibly hilarious. Of all the people that you could have used for this, Shoto is probably the worst. But I think the only reason he's being put here is just because, well, if you look at it, Bakugo's saying something. Also, interesting that Bakugo points out, like, yeah, if he isn't whammied by some kind of curse. Thank God that Bakugo is pointing that out. Because, yes, Aoyama could still be under the effect of some kind of all-for-one effect. Anyway, the reason that Shoto gets this line is because Shoto's one of the main three, I think, when it comes to the boys. But it's just, you spend an entire series pointing out that Shoto is probably the worst at communication among Class 1A when it comes to understanding what people are saying, and you're telling me that this guy somehow understands Aoyama's true nature enough to say that he knows what he wants to be more than anyone else? No, that's ridiculous. But mind you, this is now where, when you have a moment like this where the thing breaks down so much, or at least, in my opinion, it breaks down so much. What it really says, and I think we'll all agree with this, is that the author wants us to believe what Shoto is saying. Like, this is a very heavy-handed way of saying, like, yeah, he'll show back up. Will the author actually show Shoto to be wrong? Well, I mean, in a way, he showed All Might to be wrong. It would be hilarious for Shoto to be showed wrong. But we'll have to see. We'll have to see where we go with that. All I know is that Aoyama is the kind of guy that would shoot Izuku after being found out. So I would really actually like more elaboration from Shoto about what kind of man Aoyama wants to be. Anyway, I just found that segment really funny. But like when you just turn back and you don't look at it too critically, it's just okay. Shoto believes in Aoyama. That's the big thing that's coming out of there. Anyway, we then go to the Kansai region. And this was really interesting. I'm guessing this is just the author deciding, oh, I want to show you guys what Nejire and them are doing. And we see Nejire's haircut. Now, I do know from the live stream that people were surprised that Nejire's alive. And it's like, or like she's fine. It's like, yeah, it's Dobby. Like, we saw this even when she was first attacked. Nejire got a haircut. I'm pretty sure I made a joke like Dobby gave Nejire a haircut in the same chapter it happened. So good to see her. More of the same. If anyone was sincerely surprised that Nejire wasn't hurt by Dobby, I don't know what manga we're reading. Just because that's pretty clear that Dobby can't even burn. Like, remember, Dobby would be the kind of guy that gets fired from KFC. He can't fry chickens. He also probably wouldn't do good camping because he can't burn wood. That's Dobby. But for whatever reason, he's very good at melting metals. So maybe he has a future at some kind of refinery. Now, page 14 does have something extremely interesting. And it's Ryukyu. I feel really bad for this character. And ultimately, what I see here, when you see page 14, look at the composition of the page. Look at how they show, Fat Gum, Nejire, and Sun Eater, and that one villain in the background. It's actually it looks like a giant meatball villain. And then at the bottom of the page, in a single panel, you see Ryukyu. Ryukyu is actually there. Now, what's going on here? And this is going to be my conspiratorial analysis here, so take it for a grain of salt. But the author didn't draw Ryukyu into that first panel. In other words, she's not worthy of being in the same panel as these other three. To me, what I think happened, because the author could have easily just put her in her human form next to Nejire since they had succeeded in capturing the villain. He could have brought her back in there. I think that he forgot she existed, he forgot to add her into the top panel, and then he added her into the bottom panel just to show that she was there, like, oh yeah, right, Ryukyu exists. It's because Ryukyu ultimately was not treated the same way Mirko was treated, even though she was one of the people that got hammered by Shigaraki, even though she definitely deserved it. Even though we saw her get really just destroyed, like her hand got destroyed and all that kind of stuff. He never showed her until now. We've gone like 39 chapters without seeing her. And turns out, yeah, she was always right there. But that lack of care, not respecting her in the same way that he respected the other big players on the Endeavor side. Ryukyu saved so many heroes coming out of there. The lack of respect in that regard just ultimately makes her seem like she's a low priority character. And really, this is just a continuation of a pattern. At the end of the day, and this is how we can be objective, but thank God that we can actually be very objective about this. At the end of the day, I know more about Rocklock, his lover, and his spawn than I do about Ryukyu. And that's Rocklock. So what's really occurring here is just quite simply that Ryukyu is a low priority character, and she gets forgotten until it's like, oh wait, Nejire is there, I better show Ryukyu here. Ryukyu is ultimately, even though she does something to the story at an equal level as Rocklock, she is ultimately less important. And Rocklock is the best comparison because he was introduced into the same arc, into the story at the same time as her. And the author did so much to make Rocklock still relevant with helping Aizawa. It's actually really interesting. At this point, Ryukyu is more similar to Manuel than she is Rocklock, who we know way more about. And so, like, the bigger thing to talk about here is the low priority character. Ryukyu is really like Yoroi and like Manuel. Is it bad that there are low priority characters? No. Because naturally, low priority characters are going to happen. It's just something that naturally occurs. What is unfortunate, however, is that Ryukyu is one of the few female heroes that we have, and that ultimately her level of impact is comparable to Manuel instead of Rocklock. Like, I think really Rocklock is the bare minimum that Ryukyu should be at in terms of the amount of exposure we have to her and the amount of care that we have revolving around her. At this point, you can only really hope that we get some significant character stuff for Nejire, and not just something that revolves around her being in a beauty pageant. Anyway, the point of page 14 was also just to explain like the current situation on the ground, and pretty much Fat Gum just sets up, oh yeah, we're going to go into a war. So it's just, yes, thank you Fat Gum for reiterating, yeah, we are going into a war. And then the most interesting panel is that we have Hawks and All Might, and we're talking about Plan B, about the other battle that could decide it all. So that's really interesting. That dialogue is more interesting than the one for the fan scans. And seeing Hawks there, Hawks is pretty much the symbol of the adult hero plotline. So it really does feel like to me, like in the next chapter, the story of how we became heroes is going to be showing the story of how the adults became heroes again. I'm actually really curious about that. I wonder what the key info is going to be. Hopefully they tell us something that we don't know. I am a little bit curious about the other battle because I don't know what that might be referring to. But at this point, I feel like there's going to be two battles that we go into. One of the battles at UA, and then a battle probably that takes out All for One once and for all. Well, takes out All for One and then like sets up Shigaraki as the final villain. That's what I'm still thinking. So we'll have to see how exactly this goes down. I wonder what the other battle will be. Like, is it just take out I think if you also just spread out stuff so that you treat the League of Villains as their own thing and then just take out the remnants of the Liberation Army, that would be really good. So he'd pretty much be going up against Skeptic. That's what I would be thinking. That's the end of Hero Academia. One last note, because we're talking about the end of Hero Academia chapter 339. Over Jump Festa, there was like that little bit of news that Horikoshi kind of wanted to end the manga in like a year or so. Now, for me and the guys that were on live stream, this wasn't that strange because this was actually really old news. The notion that he wanted the third act to be short, because a while back during one of the volume releases, the information came out that he wanted to end things like I'm guesstimating. Well, I'm trying to remember the number, but he said he wanted to end things like in 5 volumes for the third act, and we calculated that to be around 55 chapters, just as a quick and dirty estimate. So for us, when we were hearing that news, that was just okay. That makes sense. given that this was the guy that said he wanted to end things in 5 or so volumes. So really nothing has really changed, and ultimately when it comes to the end of Hero Academia, I still am thinking it's going to be between 400 and 500 chapters. I think we still got at least 50 chapters of Hero Academia left. I think we have 60 chapters of Hero Academia left. What I think, so this is something I've explained on the live stream, but what I think is happening is that the author has bullet points about the plot points that he wants to cover. And what I think is going to happen is that I don't think he can quantify the choreography that goes into his fights. So I think it's the fights where the bloat will be incredibly large. And when you think about it, like if you look at this chapter, there's a lot of dialogue in the non-fight chapters. This is like the problem where it comes from. When you look at these chapters, there's a lot of dialogue, but when you look at the fight chapter, a lot of pages are wasted with just battle commentary or no words or just face shots. That's where the bloat comes in. The amount of material that's covered in one chapter of setup is covered in 3 chapters of fight when it comes to characters talking to each other. And that all comes out from the fact that choreography slows the manga down. Just by the sheer nature of how much information is usually in a talk-heavy chapter. Because of that, I really don't think that the author quantifies how much the fights are going to elongate things. So when we look at these final chapters, when he says he wants to be done in a year, what he's really saying is like, okay, I have enough story content for 40 or so chapters. That's all in bullet points. Then when he gets into the actual weeds, it starts to expand. That's why this thing is not going to be over in 40 chapters. It's likely that he already has written out the ending because of something that he mentioned in one of the author comments. It's likely that everything is finalized. Now it's just an issue of getting there. And again, it's going to be the fights where the bloat just increases. So I think we still have probably 2 years of Hero Academia. But again, like that still puts around 400 or 500 chapters. We'll see when we get there. Anyway, those are my quick thoughts. Guys, let me know what you thought down below. And until next time, I hope you have an absolutely great day.